All right, folks, I'd like you to bring your focus and attention up to the stage. We're about to begin our panel, our panel discussion. So let me introduce the moderator. Let me introduce the moderator, who's going to be really eliciting all this great insight for all of you today, this afternoon. Thanks for being at this session. So our panel moderator is the owner and chief communicator at Toshida Communications. She spent 15 years working in all aspects of corporate communications before starting her own communications consultancy, Toshida Communications. She has supported some of the biggest organizations in some of the most highly regulated industries, but today, she and her team focus on helping mid-sized companies clearly communicate to those who matter most to their success, so they can do more in the world. Please put your hands together and welcome Steph Toshida, everyone.
Hi, everybody. So glad you're here. I am excited to announce our distinguished panelists today. But before I do, I always feel like the first rule of good communication is to know your audience. So what I want to do is just get a quick old-fashioned show of hands. Who's in the room? Has anyone in the room also scaled a fractional business like we have? Because I'd love to involve you and ask for your input throughout this. Perfect. We're a small but mighty panel, so getting your feedback and input throughout this will be super helpful. Fantastic. Okay, cool. Well, we're going to start off by having Kristen and Carol introduce themselves as well. So both of you, could you just share a little bit about your business and how you have scaled it so far?
So Kristen Nordling, Lakeside HR Group, and we are a fractional HR consulting and recruiting organization. Louder from the back. Can we get the volume up? Or I'll just talk louder. Sorry. We'll figure this out. So we are a fractional HR consulting and recruiting organization, and I founded the company in October of 2021. Started with just myself, and quickly learned that I needed people to grow this business, and I knew I wanted this to be a growth organization, so took a chance on an intern, and that intern is still with me now, a part-time employee, but she really helped me realize that I could scale this with having the right people in the right seats. So for me now, I'm at a team of 8. That includes a consultant and as well as a couple other fractional resources too supporting me.
Hi, my name is Carol Fraser. My company is C4 Talent. This is my 4th round on building my own business. Incorporated in July of 2021, and similarly started off on my own. It's crazy that you have 2 HR people because it's funny. We're very focused on growth. So started off by myself, and then very quickly signed a very large client and had to bring on a full-time person, as well as, hold on, it's just my kids, as well as an intern and 1 tech person and 1 community manager. So we are now a team of 4, and my son is now joining us as another intern. You got to get these young kids to do all your social media for you. They know how to do it faster than any of us. So that's where I am today in a relatively short period of time.
You'll have to let me know how it goes with your son, because my son is begging to work with me, and I'm like, nope, not yet. You got to get more experience, so you'll have to let me know how that goes.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'll participate a bit as a panelist, too, since we're a small group today. So I've been in business about 4 years, and we have 10 1099s. So I've been really nervous about going the W-2 route, and I think that's something I'm going to have to figure out at some point. I would love to pick your brains about that. But so far, I've had sort of some contract support, about 10 folks. I also have made the mistake, just in terms of intention and learnings, I made the mistake of keeping more people less busy earlier in my time, if you know what I mean. I had up to 20 people at one point who didn't have a lot of vested interest in my business at all, if we're being very honest, right? And that was just kind of a function of me running around like a chicken with my head cut off as my business was growing and not being intentional and not being super smart about how I did that. So I've kind of reduced that down to fewer people who have more eggs in my basket, if you will. And yeah, it's not the dedication of an employee, but I've definitely seen that dedication and that sort of investment kind of ratchet up and feel a lot better to me. So that's just kind of maybe an interesting note from a staff.
Yeah, and I think, to add on to that, I, for the last 2 years, have been scaling when I felt stretched. So when I felt like I was doing too much, there was too much going on, felt stretched, the team was stretched, and that's not necessarily a good thing. And I've now realized that I have to be more proactive, and the work will come. It's just a matter of making sure I've got, again, the resources to support that work. It's scary because it's an investment, but at the same time, knowing that I've got the people that have the skills, that's going to be extremely important. So I'm refocusing going into 2024 as scaling more intentionally, but yet not, and more proactively.
So one thing I'd love to ask you both is, you've been in business several years. Is there a situation where what you've created today, what it looks like today, is not what you initially set out to create? And what would that look like? Kind of what did you set out to do, and what does it look like today? And a little bit about how that evolved.
Definitely. It is iterative pretty much every quarter. But when I originally set out in July 2021, I was focusing, actually leaning more into my coaching practice with an occasional fractional client, and it has flipped. So now I have more fractional clients, and I'm only doing one-on-one coaching now. So I have had to move that needle and move away from doing biz dev to individuals to doing biz dev to companies, and had to shift my whole marketing campaign. And basically I started and did a bunch of investing into one kind of way with just a little bit of marketing for fractional, and then now I'm completely shifted to the other side, which is again the reason why I hire 20-somethings. They work very fast.
Yes. And for me, yes, I've gone through a couple iterations, and I had I thought it was going to be focused primarily on recruiting. I had started with my coaching certification. I thought I was going to be doing more coaching and recruiting. And I realized that the HR consulting piece was one area that there was just such a demand for small businesses. And my clients are small businesses, typically under that 50 million. They typically don't have an HR department. And so sometimes we're a phone a friend. And I actually had debated it actually in the last 6 months, or 6 months ago, about shutting down that practice and just focusing on recruiting. And when I really took a step back, I realized we are a full service HR partner, and we'd be doing our clients and ourselves a disservice by shutting down that practice.
Yeah. And for me, I feel like I'm leading this panel probably because I'm one of the most unintentional people in terms of how I've stumbled into this. I mean, that's just the way I've done it. So when I started out 4 years ago, I was just kind of going to be a freelancer, just do communications. And I did that for about 2 years. That was about all I could handle during COVID, and we moved and homeschooling and all the things, right? And that level of risk was all I could tolerate too. So for those of you who are in corporate still, who are thinking about jumping, there were a lot of reasons I couldn't just jump really willy-nilly. I'm the main breadwinner in our family, and I'm also a really risk-averse person. So what that looked like for me was, I'm going to go from Friday being a W-2 at a big corporation to Monday being a 1099, really doing the same thing, kind of having a long-term contract. Didn't light my heart on fire, but that was about as much risk as I could take back then. So I just share that to say that was a step forward for me. I was out on my own in many ways, and it isn't where I am at today. It took me kind of a long time to realize, I can figure out who I want to serve, and it's not this big corporation. I can start to take some risks. I can start to go out on my own and generate some business and do some of those kinds of activities that honestly take a whole lot of time, and I just wasn't mentally there when I started. So where I'm at is completely different than today too. I didn't dream of having a team. I didn't dream of all these things. And again, I just want to share that to say it can look very different. If you're contemplating something, just try stuff and see what happens, and it will evolve. It should evolve, and that's okay. You don't have to have all the answers when you're thinking about making a jump.
I had a conversation yesterday with somebody, and I made the comment that every fractional business can be different, and it does not have to have a team. It can be just you. It can be you can be the subject matter expert. You have control over that, and I think last night's panel as well kind of hit to that too. It's what you want it to be. And I wanted this to be a growth business. I wanted to have a team. I did want to, either sell it someday or have my son, who keeps begging to work with me, which I think he'll regret someday, by the way. But, he could take it over someday. So it was really important to me when I started this that I was very clear and intentional about this was a growth business.
Super smart. Carol, how did you think about that when you were approaching kind of lifestyle versus growth business?
So when I had my first consultancy, it was 2000 to 2014, and it was very successful. And I had only 1099ers at the time, but I had a dozen of them. And we were rocking and a-rolling, and we were just having a great time. So I knew I wanted this time around to that's where my bar is. So it didn't get there right away, right? It took time. And so my bar is still there. I want this to ultimately be something that is self-sustainable. That my first employee is someone who was an HR coordinator, so a junior person, but was so hungry. And when I had worked with her as a W-2 CHRO, I asked my employees, ultimately, what do you want to be? She's like, I want your job. And I'm like, you're my successor. So I immediately, when I signed that huge client, I said, hey, I think it's time for you to quit your job. I think you need to come work for me. So I've already got my successor that I will be mentoring for the next 5-10 years so that the business does keep going. And so she's actually gone. I've sent her to different masterminds so that she isn't just thinking about how to grow the business my way, but rather what else can you bring in as different ideas. And now she's really leaning into the marketing side of the business because she recognizes, and she's an introvert. Where's my introverts? Who absolutely hates talking in front of people, but she's learning that biz dev and marketing and all this stuff requires you to get in front of people. So I really believe that it's going to scale well beyond me, given the fact that I now have someone from that next generation who thinks like the new entrepreneurs of small businesses are going to think. So we're really focusing on not only your typical people our age who are small business owners, but I'm really pushing her to find those small business owners who are under 40, who relate to her, that help to grow the business for a sustainable period of time, because they're just starting their careers.
That's amazing. I admire so much the intention both of you have described. Yeah, go ahead. Of course. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's the $1 million question. So for those who couldn't hear, how much time are we working on the business versus in the business?
So I would say it's flipping more to on the business for me. For the first 2 years, it was definitely in the business. And I've started to see that pivot point in the last 2-3 months, because now my team is humming. And now what I'll do is show up at the important meetings with the client. So if I have a weekly meeting with the client as a check-in, and that is one thing that I think I'm going to be talking about in a different panel, which is every time I am in front of the client, I am re-interviewing for my contract. So it's important that the person who's most confident, that has the most knowledge, gets in front of the client and just says, how's it going? What's going on? Here's what we worked on. Do you like our priorities? And I get there once a week in front of my clients, and the rest of the time I'm in the background supporting. And so if there's a gap in knowledge, I am tapped on the shoulder, and we all work in my home, so I'm always, tap, tap, can you get on the call? So I'll get on the call and answer the question. So I'm flipping it right now so it took me about 2 years to really not be in the business, and you have to hire at least some sort of 1099ers, go to Upwork, find your web guy in Nigeria, find your community manager in the Philippines, get whatever you need to for the prices that you can afford so that you can scale your business and get out of doing and focus more on strategy.
It's my 2024 goal. I would say on the recruiting side, I'm not in the business as much. I am doing the business development for it. The consulting side, it's probably I feel good about the fact that I've reduced it to about 30 to 40%, and I've now started to find outsourced providers to help me with IT, marketing. From a PEO perspective, hopefully soon as well. So there are definitely, ways that I can get out of being in the business too.
Yeah, and I'm probably 50-50. I've had times where I'm 100% out of the business, working on it, and I love that. And I've had times I've had to kind of dive back in for any number of reasons. And then it makes it that much harder to keep your foot on the gas of all the on the business stuff, and it really drives me crazy. So it's like the constant challenge, and I would say it's probably the thing I talk most with folks like us about, like, how are you balancing that? For the three of you who raised your hand who have done some scaling work, what would you say your ratio is? I'd love to hear. And is that okay? Yeah. Go ahead, John.
Is this working? Yeah.
Yeah.
If you have questions, I have a microphone, so I'll bring it to you so we can all hear. Yep.
Thanks, John.
I knew there would be questions. Plus, I got to get my steps in.
Love it.
Thanks. Well, so I work with a large law firm. So I'm the fractional, I'm the, like you said, the space we should be playing in, seat at the table, advisor. I try to do as little legal work as possible because I got people that can do that, right? But that's how my model's worked and how we've been able to leverage it. I do see in Cincinnati, the market I'm with, that certain, like fractional CFOs or fractional CHROs or even CIOs are connecting with accounting firms. And so accounting firms are fine. They got to find a way to distinguish themselves because they're just tax and audit, and they're becoming accounting plus. So then what happens is they can bring you in with their clients to really get sticky, and then you have resources back. Back office resources to be able to do that work. So you're doing the work you're supposed to be doing, which is being that executive with that group. So that's kind of how I built mine. I know it's unusual, but at some point, right, you don't want to be where you are in the business all the time. That's not your highest and best use.
Preach.
True that.
Preach. Any of the others who have done some scaling want to share? I'd love to hear.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So it's a response and a question actually laced into that because that's what I wanted to ask. So I run a digital marketing agency. I've scaled to a team of 8, and I have gotten to a place where I don't manage the clients. I don't do the work. It's the coolest place ever. Loving it.
I can't wait.
Super, it's really fun. And actually, but I do, one of the things that I've just realized, which is why I'm fractional curious, is that, we get paid for the tactics, what we're executing on. But you can't do it without the strategy. So we're doing the strategy just for free is basically how that's going, because we need to make the plan to do the things. But when I think about pivoting to fractional, I would imagine our clients expect way more of me in that high-level role. So it actually feels a little bit like needing to dip down into I'm a limited resource and back into the doing of the doing. So I'd be curious just to hear how you've scaled the fractional concept, because I feel like they'd be expecting to buy my time. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah, and that's been one of the things, that's a great question, and one of the things that I've been very intentional on in 2023 is I knew I couldn't keep managing the workload that I had and growing the business. So I am very big at putting things out in the universe and helping people understand kind of what I'm looking for. I talk to people, I share ideas. I'm very much a think out loud person. And I found a resource that it literally was a gift to me that had more skills than I did in the HR consulting side, even though she had never consulted. So where I could be help her develop her skills was really on the development side, but she's very strategic. She could very easily go into my clients and do that work. So I bill her at the rate that I was getting. So I'm now selling our services, not necessarily my services. I'm not selling myself anymore, and that was the big difference. I still find myself every once in a while, because I get excited about some of these projects. I'm like, oh, I can do this, But I have to remember we're a team now, and in order for me to continue to grow, I'm going to need to continue to find those resources to tap into, whether they be 1099 or W-2. So for me, it was really about finding that person I felt confident that if I stepped away, they could continue doing the work that we were doing and maybe even do it better.
Your clients were receptive
surprisingly, I did not have one issue, and
agreed.
I have introduced her. I had one where I literally just had to plop her in because I was going to be here, and I said, "All right, well, you're going to meet Steve, and you're going to take this client, and you're going to do this leadership development session." I knew it was her sweet spot. He loved it. Part of it is, I think he saw the confidence I had in her too. And I made that intro. I have another client I'm slowly starting to introduce her to, and now she's going to be doing a pretty large reduction in force for them. And that's, obviously something that takes a lot of, they need confidence in us at Lakeside. And so, you have to be confident in it, because if you're not confident in it, the client will see it right away.
So I'm a little more prescriptive. I actually am part of the full onboarding process of the client with that individual in tow. So that client gets myself and whoever their, call it, primary contact is. And I'll do that onboarding, whether that's 1 week or 30 days, like it'll be a partnership, but anything that comes out of it, that is the responsibility of that person. Now, I will say this, not every field, HR definitely one of them, knows how to do account management. So that is a skill that I have had to teach. I get the expertise of that HR or whatever it is, whether it be marketing or whether it be digital or finance. They're not always necessarily good account managers. So that is one thing I would just kind of give advice, which is make sure that whoever you bring on really understands what account management means, regardless of what your expertise is. Because when I say every time I'm in front of that client, I'm re-interviewing for that contract, because let's face it, I want an extension, I want to renew, and so on. That account manager, and having worked at marketing firms, I know this, that account manager is what keeps the client. The minute that account manager walks away, you usually end up losing that client if you put somebody who's not as good of an account manager on it. So I would say that's a skill that all fractionals who are looking to scale need to lean into.
I so appreciate the question. I think it's like the crux of the whole thing, right? How do you get the right folks who you feel comfortable having be client-facing, who are going to give that level of service and expertise that you will? I get into that place too where it's like, nobody can do it better than me. Nobody cares as much as I do about this business, right? And it's really hard to let that go. I even dust off like old blog posts, and I can see how much I used to say I, me. And it's funny, it stands out to me now because I don't do that anymore. I made a very conscious decision. It's we, it's the team. And I sell the team proactively. And it used to kind of scare me to admit that it wasn't just me. Because a lot of the people coming into my business were people who'd worked with me. Like that's what they thought they were buying. And that really scared me. I also, because I wasn't super intentional, I have my last name in the company, which is a problem that needs to get fixed at some point too. So again, the way you guys have done that is way smarter. Go ahead.
You mentioned something I was going to ask.
Yeah.
You went from I to we.
Uh-huh.
At what point did you have another person with you that you could say we about? Right? There's this whole idea. I see it a little bit when they're referencing we, and it looks like a one person. So how do I be a we if I'm a me?
Yeah, and then
It's
maybe
the
an add-on
royal
question.
we.
Yeah.
I'm an I, but I'm creating, developing a community.
Yeah.
So it's we.
Yeah.
To me, my business model is a community. So
Yeah.
Well, I would even go as simplistic, which is, do you ever go, excuse me, can you help me with this question? That's a we. Yeah. And I just think that we need to recognize that none of us ever do any of our jobs on our own, ever. In a career as a W-2, it's always a we. And I think that you're putting a lot of onus and a lot of stress if it's always the I. And the we is almost an open door to say, even if I don't know the question, I'm going to find somebody else who does. So.
The other thing I just add to that is I have really observed lately that their clients find a lot of value in knowing there's a we. So I lean, like the obstacle is the way. I used to be scared of it. Now I lean into it like crazy. And just this idea that even if you, client, have me or someone else that's kind of your main point person, they're part of a community on my team of experts who are constantly sharing best practices, constantly talking across clients and industries, and you are getting that expertise delivered through them. That's such a value add to them. So I think it's just leaning into that message and really leveraging it. to your point about like, well, when was it truly a we? And there's a lot of starts and stops to that. Like, how legitimate is that? Or especially for me with 1099s and getting people more dedicated to where I didn't want to put somebody in front of the client who might not show up tomorrow. Like, there's been a lot of stumbling through that, a lot of feeling through that. I can look back and say that I did not always do that exactly right. Or I learned really quick, to the other comment, like who actually in the end wasn't great to be client facing, wasn't account management material. I mean, I learned that the hard way. So I think it's all part of it. Yeah, go ahead, Camille.
Just to kind of parlay on that 1099 thing, I have consulted in the past, and because of the nature of my work, I have to bring in partners. So on some of the work that just goes way beyond my scope. So I have questions about how do you bring in those partners, and you're carrying the responsibility with the contractual agreement with a client, and then how do you keep that scaling profitable when, in what ratio would you mark up a contractor in order to justify, you're responsible for other people delivering then.
Right. And I think it's a bit of a question of the strategy of what do you offer? What is like a 1099 that's kind of on your team, or a W-2? And then what are you partnering externally with? What are you just referring out because you don't want to touch it? There's a lot to that. Go ahead.
I don't think there's, I can't give one one answer because it's situational for me. I have some clients that I know are nonprofit, and I know that the markup has to be lower just given the fact that the work that they need done is important, and it's important for them, but they don't have the financials. I have others that are private equity. They don't even blink, when I tell them an hourly rate. So, and it is, my team has really challenged me, because when I started, I was like, why, like everybody had said earlier or yesterday, why would they pay for my services at that rate? And so I had to get over that, and I've had to be challenged and pushed on my rates. But I have looked at what my overhead costs are too. And
do you double your contractors? Agencies will typically, times 3, and I need to stay profitable, and I can't be, marking people up 25%, and so that I struggle with, and I also struggle with what are my contracts with my contractors. What does that need to look like? So how do I set it up for success?
So I'm curious, when you have to bring in those 1099ers, is it for a finite period of time for a specialty? So I encourage you to try something different. Why don't you create a referral program whereby you bring in that contractor, they worry about having their own legal contract, and you say, I get 5%, 10% of this assignment that I just gave you. This way, you actually reduce your risk. You make them responsible for their output. You're looked at as a key resource who knows people to get things done, and then you're just taking a little bit off the top. This is fine. Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things with the scaling that I think we were going to talk about, I'm actually white labeled through 2 other companies. So if they want to skim off the top of me, I don't care. My rates are my rates. And I know that my work ethic and my value and the impact is going to get that to continue on. So they love working with me. One guy makes $1,500 a month off of me. Another woman makes $3,000 a month off of me. And she actually, her contract states that I get paid in 60 days. It's never happened. I get paid usually within 25 days. But she's, securing herself to say, you're not going to get paid for 60 days because our terms with the client is net 30, and therefore mine with you is net 60. So that should take care of your cash flow issue.
That's what I do.
I would also say, I think there's a bit of a strategic question of, what do you want to offer through your organization? And do you want to white label things? I made a decision that I don't ever want to be accountable for something that I could not step in and help with. So if it gets too far off into digital marketing or something else, even though that's ancillary, I theoretically could say I offer that, it just feels too outside the box. In the first few years, I would do all sorts of things. It's like you take what you can get. But as I've kind of focused in on what the communications business does. I don't want to offer web design or just like even pretend that it's me. I would just rather refer that out for peace of mind and trust that there's kind of an abundant universe where if I'm putting that out, things will come back into. So I would just encourage you too to think about, what do I want this business to be? How do I want to resource it? What are those guardrails and what comes in that's outside of it? And it can be really hard and it's hard to turn those first few things down, but I think you potentially might be glad you did. Something to think about.
So I just want to add in that something to think about also is depending on your fractional focus. Like for instance, I'm a fractional COO. I generally have like a part-time EA for myself, but for my clients, if they need help that's outside of my scope and or something that is not the best use of my time or their money, I will bring in someone for them. I will hire as their COO. So you don't necessarily need to have some contractors work for you, depending on your fractional focus. You can actually hire as their leader for the team, whether it's 1099, long-term, part-time, whatever. Just wanted to put that out there.
It's a great point. I'm doing that right now for a client myself. Yeah, absolutely.
I have two questions. The first one's really simple and very tactical. What is the average length of your contract that you're putting out there?
12 months auto renewal.
Impressive.
For me, it's because we do truly sometimes phone a friend type of work. It's just ongoing. It's just an hour, whether it's an hourly rate. I have some that are on retainer. So there is no end date.
Mine is all over the board, but generally I'd say I'm working toward 12 months auto renewal as well.
Okay, so just commenting on that, starting out, I put out a 6-month contract with a 30-day renewal because I didn't know if I wanted to be with the client for a year.
That's huge.
Very good, yeah.
Okay, okay, second question, a little harder. So first client, 2 months in, pitching a second client. I'm on a retainer with the first client, and although they don't pay me hourly, I've started to track my hours just to feel if I'm in line with what I expected, and I am. I'm doing about 16 hours. The problem is the 16 hours are spanned across 4 days. I might have an 8 o'clock and then a 10 o'clock, and it feels more like a full-time job, except for Fridays, because I'm not going to work Fridays. How do you compartmentalize, if you think back to when you first started, how do you compartmentalize that second client? Do you say Tuesdays and Thursdays are yours and Mondays? How does that work in your world?
So it's definitely all about scheduling yourself. And again, the scaling side is that do you have people to support you? So if you're doing it all on your own, it's definitely about scheduling yourself. I'm also extremely communicative. So my retainers, if you go over your monthly hours, it's a higher hourly rate. So many times they're like, just tell me where I am every week, and we'll just have to, modify what happens on the next week or next month. We'll push it, and that's also a great way to extend your contract. The other thing is you just need to manage that expectation up front. My contract has an SLA in it. So if it's this goes back to my tech background. If it's this kind of question, if it's tier 1, I will get back to you in 72 hours. If it's tier 2, I'll get back to you in 48. Tier 3, you can have my text number. So I think it's really a matter of setting that expectation, because it's the same expectation if you were working on multiple projects as an employee and you all have competing deadlines, if you will. At least that's my mindset going into it. But it is really just kind of probably over communication. What about you?
Yeah, I will say I'm not very good at it. Part of it is the nature of the work that I'm doing. I am the HR department, or our team is the HR department for our clients. And so you can't plan for when you're going to get that call when there's an employee relations issue, or when all of a sudden they're planning to do a RIF. Well, I didn't have that in my schedule, so crap. Now what am I going to do? So it's a little bit more difficult for me, and that's part of the reason why I added to the staff, and I'm taking a chance on growing the team, because I think there's enough work, and I'm looking at the clients and saying, okay, I do think that these 6 or 7 clients are going to go into 2024 based on what we did this last year. I think I can add another person. So I'm trying to be a little bit more thoughtful on it, but I will say I am running by the seat of my pants on some of this. And you're probably in the same.
Very same. I've thought about putting in like really stringent boundaries with certain clients around days. And then I've thought to myself, oh, but then I actually kind of have to deliver what I just told them. And it often doesn't work for me to do that. So it does get a little chaotic. And I've sort of said, okay, that trade-off's worth it to me. But it definitely, one day I looked at my time tracking software. I love the idea of making sure you're still tracking your time on a retainer, see how you're feeling. And I think I touched, 12 different things that day, whether it was clients or biz dev or, whatever. And I'm like, no wonder I'm exhausted at the end of the day. That task switching is really challenging. So it's not necessarily the best way to do it, but that trade-off has felt worth it. Awesome questions. Yeah. Other questions? I mean, we can keep talking, but I love hearing from the group. Yeah. I can repeat it too. So.
There's a great blog, Fractionals United, and it talks about this pricing unit art and science. And I know, what we do, we want the clients to call us. Because typically, you don't call your attorney unless it's a shit show. You're going to try to figure it out yourself because it's it's super expensive, and you're going to be told no, and you're not going to be able to, right? So we've got to get them over that hump to go, no, we really want you to call us because we're going to be better advisors to your business if we get more people involved and we can introduce you to the people who have the expertise that you need to give you in the time that you need. So we do obviously we track time, but what we found is it's really about the scope and the assumptions. Like, how many hours do you think you're going to utilize us? And here's what we think is going to be in, and if it goes there, out of scope, right? Because a general counsel typically is not doing a lot of legal work. They're doing the strategy, they're managing all of that work. And that's been a game changer for us because before, part of it is, and if it's too high, then they go, well, I'm just going to stick with what I've got. That's the art of it. And it's not like you're trying to boonswoggle them, but you've got to get in so they get a taste of it and go, this is different than what we've had. We love the relationship. As a smaller company, we love the access to experts that mainly big companies get from these big firms, but you got to get in there for proof of concept. So what we'll do is we'll do that we don't call it a flat fee anymore because we have a true up, but we do that retainer. And then we're fortunate because we can carry it for a while. Because those first couple of months, if it's done right, and if they're telling their people, don't worry about the meter, call them. They can help you. Man, those first 3 or 4 months, it's working. And we are just, if you took a snapshot, we're losing financially. But over time, we're putting those things into place, and it's becoming more of that kind of, we call us when you need us more than, we have to actually set up your whole systems for you. But again, set your assumptions and agree upon those things and then communicate. If for some reason you're blowing through that, that's a good thing, but let them know that because it's got to be a win-win if it's going to work long term.
Yeah, I have a question for the crowd. So how often do you sit down with your client and go through your SOW? Or do you wait for the client to come to you and say, I want to go through the SOW?
Orderly, I heard.
So I make sure before we actually close the business, I don't do proposals, I only do engagement letters. So we walk through the details because it's all about setting and managing to expectations. So if we don't have a shared understanding of what success looks like, I'm already set up for failure. And you have to get to specificity and clarity about what that is, be it a metric or whatever. So you got to be proactive on that. And I wanted to build on what you were saying is there's a lot you can do in terms of proactively, not just about the SOW, but about the relationship. So there's a self-serving here, but there's a nice little diagram on the wall there that talks about the difference between being a vendor, a preferred partner, a preferred provider, and a partner, and it's all about the relationship expectations. So if you want to be a partner, there's an element of planning and then programmatic delivery. That's different than being a vendor where you're transactional. And a preferred partner, you're more contractual. And it's not to say that one is good or bad, but know your own positioning and what you want and be intentional about choosing that so you can have those proactive expectation-setting conversations with clients to say, this is how we want to work. Is this how you want us to work? Let's make sure we're on the same page. Otherwise, if we're not, we're already set up for failure.
Yeah, even on week 1 with one of my clients that came on, we put the SOW in a Gantt chart, and within the first 2 weeks, we color coded it. It was all blue, but within the first 2 weeks, a bunch of pink kind of slipped in, you know? And I'm like, I'm just going to go through this with you every time we meet weekly, just to show you we're here for you beyond the SOW. We're your partner. But I just also want to show you where the heck my time's going, because you have me for a retainer of 50 hours. But I even have, for my business and for our kind of business, we've got so many different facets, as I'm sure everybody does with their kind of roles. And I put that on a second Gantt chart and said, just so you know, this is our 10-point health check, and it's got like probably 100 things on it. And every time we touch on one of those things, which is my industry kind of litmus test, I highlight in pink and say, yeah, so this wasn't on the SOW, but just so you can see, you're doing the right thing, client, because we're touching on everything that your business needs, and this also just continues to educate them. I don't know, we always hear about human resources. People don't really, we're either recruiters or we're payroll people. That's what people think, right? And so the idea is to continually be educating my client on the services and the value of those services on as many times as I can.
I want to just give a plug really quick for something that you'll find in the Voyager curriculum that Jason and John put out there around not over-servicing your first client, even though that can be really tempting, because then when you have more clients coming on, they're going to experience a difference and they're not going to like it. Jason or John, that's one of the things that stands out for me years after consuming that content, and probably a mistake I've made. Is there anything you'd want to just add that would be helpful? I think it's maybe germane just to the conversation about scope and service and all of that. And how do you strike that balance? You want your client, especially your first one who you need, to feel really good, but you got to be building for something else.
Well, since John isn't here, or I can't find him, I'll speak in his stead. Yeah, it's kind of managing your own schedule is something we work through as fractionals, right? I think the biggest thing that I tend to concentrate, and it took me a long time to get there, is to kind of have a different measure for, it's not hours, it's not scope, it's impact. Mm-hmm. So what is the impact I'm having for my colleagues at these different companies? I don't consider them clients. Mm-hmm. They're colleagues of mm-hmm. mine. So my if I'm having an impact, and my goal is to have the maximum impact actually in the fewest number of hours, mm-hmm. in the least amount of time, because I want, he is a client,
I'm his colleague.
I love it.
So the thought process is, it's not that we don't need to communicate, and we don't need to make sure that, we're not kind of, going over or kind of going under, but, as wisdom workers, how do you charge an hourly rate for saving a client $1 million mistake? What hourly rate is appropriate for that? It's just a different sort of kind of mindset and conversation that we have. So, yeah, just a different way I've come to think about it after kind of years of being in it and scaling a fractional business myself. Mm-hmm. It's the only way I've been able to do it. Is if it were just a number of hours, then it would have to scale with a number of people, and that's not what I wanted. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to. That's kind of a vestige of kind of corporate America, is how many people were on your team, ergo how much value you have. And I measure that differently. It's the amount of impact I have for my client.
Can I add one remark to that?
Of course.
As your colleague.
I love this.
I think that hours and headcount is scarcity-based thinking. And I don't think that's a productive perspective on the value that's being produced. So from the the colleagues standpoint, see, we all fall back into that kind of nomenclature, and it's really hard to pull yourself out of that. But the notion of hours and headcount, it's limiting. So
yeah.
Go ahead. Thank you. Two things to add to that. So back to SOW, I would encourage you to think of this as a part-time job. So just like when you're full-time W-2, you're not looking at an SOW, you're looking at your job description. You have goals, you have, agreed to accomplish. So look at it that way, because you are a part-time team member, you're a part-time leader. You have something you're accountable to. So that is what you should be reviewing with your CEO, partner, whoever you report to. And the second thing, to add to what Jason was saying, I was speaking to someone else in the community the other day, and he's like, I'm thinking about my client when I'm on the golf course, when I'm showering, when I'm whatever I'm doing. As leaders, part of our value is, the things that you cannot measure. Like, once you're a partner, once you're engaged, like I do this all the time. I'm like, okay, that's bothering me. How am I going to do this? And I put it aside, and then I think about it later. You can't measure that, and that's why it's value based. It's what do you bring to the engagement? What impact are you making? How do you help? And that's why Fractional works, because you are an embedded team member. It's not. I would say don't think of it as a pitch or a proposal or SOW. You are part of the team. What is your purpose? How do you measure that purpose and communicate? I have a client now that I've chosen to give more time to because they are small and they need it, and I know up front. And I had a conversation with the CEO 2 weeks ago during our check-in. I'm like, I just want you to know I'm not asking for more. I'm choosing to do this, but because we're on a weekly retainer, I want you to know I'm doing this now so that when things are settled and we're back to where it should be, you're not like, oh, where's Karina? And she's like, yeah, I know. But it was a lovely conversation, and I just wanted to put it on the table. It's all about just being transparent and communicating. And if it's a true partnership, which it should be, and if it's not, if you can get out, get out. It's just about that.
One thing I think as we start to think about wrapping up here, we've got a little bit more time, is especially for those of you who are just contemplating this and thinking about it, for sure this is not the easiest path you could take in life. I mean, I say that all the time. And so I think it's really important to think about why. Why are you doing this? Like, what is your reason? What is the thing that keeps you going when it is really freaking hard? And so I would love to invite you both to share, like, why do you do this? And then just anyone else in the room who wants to add on to that. I think that could be like an inspiring way to wrap up, as we've talked about a lot of the challenges and tricky spots today.
For me, the why is, when I look at the work that I'm doing, I know I'm adding value to the organization, and I know our team is adding value to the organizations that we serve. And so for me, that gives me a lot of joy. I also love, I'm a problem solver. I love solving companies' challenges. And so when I started this business, I knew that small businesses did not know what good HR could look like. And so helping them understand that HR can help drive their business strategies and be a key member of their team to help them do that, that is my why. Plus, I did want to build something that was bigger than me that I could, hopefully, like I said, either sell or have my family take it over.
A lot of the same. Mine was for, I'm sure most of us do it for our families because we're not home enough. We're spending too much time traveling. I've got teenagers, and they're going to be leaving soon, so I'm trying to stick in there and give them as much, information in their brain on how to be good humans before they go out on their own. And it's also the reason why I actually really enjoy working at home with my door open, because they're actually learning business acumen just through all the massive conversations that I'm having. So that's one of the reasons why I went into it. But it kind of parlays a bit off of what she said. Again, our industry, we're a little bit of the redheaded stepchild in a company, right? We're what?
Or pink-headed.
Or, yeah, there you go. And my company's whole mission, whether it be coaching an individual, because I only coach HR people, or if it's working with an organization, is to help to shift the reputation and the mindset of what human resources is. So it's a bigger purpose, and I just felt that by being a W-2 employee, I wasn't making the impact. My voice, I didn't have time to do thought leadership, right? I didn't have time to go and talk at conferences or do speaking gigs. And I really just wanted to get the idea that, you can't run your business without people, and you need a people person to help you with your people. And I know you all are wonderful managers because you're perfect, but you might want to just tap us on the shoulder, and we're going to help elevate you and your people and your organization. So that was my big sell.
Yeah. I spend a lot of time thinking about the why because I do feel like it takes a fair amount of either delusion or optimism or both to like keep doing this every freaking day and just truly believe that something big is going to happen when every day you know the slog that you're going through. So for me, like I am so passionate about helping mid-market companies grow. And the way we do that is by helping them build relationships with those who matter to their success through communication. So I also encourage you, think about that bigger value you provide. Communication is what we do. It was like the last thing I just said, you know? So think about that, just a little marketing comms tip. But I'm super passionate about helping mid-market grow. They need the help. I'm super passionate about helping people who would otherwise have opted out of kind of the traditional way of working stay in the workforce. I've got people on my team who work 5 hours a week and homeschool their kids. And like, I'm so passionate about that. I don't feel like that's as interesting as it was 4 years ago when I started. Like that's much more common now, but that drives me a ton. And then I want to make really good money and take it and go do really good things in the world that have nothing to do with business. Like I'm very clear on my why. I don't always know how the heck I'm going to do it. Like the how is not clear, but the why is really super clear and it does keep me going. And so I just really encourage all of you to just really think about that why. Like who are you trying to serve? What's the problem you solve? Do you really, really want to do it? Will it keep you going on the hardest, most lonely day? Kind of keeping focused on that thing that you're trying to do? Because I think that's going to be the thing that keeps you going. Any of you in the room, would you want to share your why? I'd love to hear. Yeah, go ahead. Right there.
Oh, thanks. So I'll just add on to what you're saying, and is that your why can evolve over time.
Yeah.
So I've been doing this long enough in different ways. I've drawn a triangle that you're trying to balance between lifestyle and wealth and purpose. And it's become a reflective exercise every year. I think, where would I draw that dot in that triangle between those things? And I've watched it changed over the years. When I was 29 and single, it was one end. As I added more and more children and a mortgage, it moved to another area. And then as I become an empty nester, it's now going to another place. So I just would encourage, and I'm just impressed by how the three of you answered, the self-reflection is important, and know that. That self-awareness is absolutely critical because it drives your choice making. So the more you know about that why, the better the choices you're going to be making.
I love it. Go ahead.
I think my why, I'm transitioning into becoming fractional, and I think my why is a little bit different. A lot of people are talking about like families and responsibilities, which I don't have any, and I can be very risk open right now. My biggest thing is having been so disrespected in past jobs, and even sitting on an executive team and having people not valuing me and listening to me. It sounds like when you build a fractional business, people come to you because you've projected your value. You've already made that, like they've made that decision, like I value your expertise, who you are, and we're coming to you. So you're making those terms. And that to me, because I like to work hard, I like to be an overachiever. I just don't want to be disrespected at my work.
And you can choose,
seriously.
And you can choose the clients that you want to work with. I fired a client because they were very disrespectful to me, to my team. And I said, this is not who we are as an organization. She threatened not to pay me, and I sent the final invoice, and I got paid. That was one of those moments where I don't like to not be liked, but at that moment, I felt very proud of the fact that, hey, no, that's not okay. That's not who I want to work with.
Similar story. I actually pitched someone, and it was just a perfectly fine pitch, but my intuition was like, I don't know about this one. So I actually asked for another hour of his time, where I asked a couple of more kind of probing questions to really figure out, who am I really working with here? And towards the end of that hour, I just respectfully said, I just don't think I'm your person. It was a decent sized six-figure contract, and I was just like, I'm not going to do it. And I went to dinner with my son at the end of the day, and I just kind of prepped him, because I was really excited about the opportunity, and I prepped him. I said, I talked to him a little bit after that, and I don't think I'm going to take it. And my 15-year-old goes, Mom, I'm really glad you chose your mental health over the money.
That's amazing. Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I love what you were saying about that why developing over time. I'm a year into being full-time as a fractional COO, and I know I'm going to have a more long-term why emerge as I do this, but it's been so interesting. For years in my career, I felt like I was a Ferrari on the freeway stuck behind a tractor going 15 miles an hour. And once I made the leap to fractional full-time, it felt like the tractor was gone, the road was open, and I'm suddenly on the Autobahn and I can drive as fast as I possibly can and let's see how fast this engine goes. And it's thrilling because I feel like I'm doing the work I'm meant to be doing. And now that I'm a year into this, now I'm starting to think about what's next. What is that bigger picture why? Now that I have the freedom to really think about that and to, I'm no longer fighting these constraints. Now it's, what are the possibilities?
I can't think of a better way to wrap as we're at the top of our time.
That was awesome.
Mic drop. Thank you. That's a beautiful picture of what we're all working toward, and I love hearing you say that, and you painted that so beautifully. So is it time to turn back over to you? I want to keep us on schedule.
Yeah, how about a big hand for Steph and our panel today?
We did it.
We'll end on the Ferrari getting the tractor getting out of the way of our Ferraris. I like that image. I want to get in that Ferrari. Yes, that sounds great. Congratulations. Thank you all very, very much for being up here. One more round of applause. We cannot extend enough love at all. Okay, so coming up in about 15 minutes, there are going to be 2 sessions to choose from. And I want to remind you that we're videotaping, so anything that you're missing, you can catch on video later. I also want to remind you that you're hearing a lot about a lot of different resources that are available. And if you're having a creeping anxiety of, oh, I'd really like that, but where is that? And how am I going to get that if I leave here? And so on and so forth. I'd like to quell that anxiety right now. At the website, the FRAC 2023 website, just put that in Google and it'll come up. All the resources that have been talked about and shared and all that are going to be available on that website. And if you don't see them there is a Contact Us button, and you can make a special request, and we'll take care of you and get that set up. So resources, videos, it'll all be there for you to be able to extract the most out of this experience that you're having here today. Okay, so coming up, upstairs in the Finovation Lab is going to be at 11:30 panel discussion on compensation and negotiation. And right here at 11:30 is going to be a really moving and amazing founder story by Nancy Koresh, if I'm saying that right. Let me make sure I'm saying it right. Yes, I am saying it right. Nancy Koresh. She's going to be right here. So you have 15 minutes to get where you need to go. I believe that snacks are set up in the Brewer's Den if it's time for that, and a little coffee. And then we'll see you all back here. Thank you.